infinite inference. Okay, not quite infinite, but a whole heck of a lot of inference power comes from this powerhouse machine from Camino. It's the Camino Grande server, and it has not one, not two, not three. Don't have time for this. It has six 4090s inside of it. But how could you possibly fit six 4090s in this single casing? Aren't they absolutely massive? Well, the real size of the 4090 is mostly in like heatsink, fans, and other air cooling necessities. Camino ships this Inference beast fully water cooled. But, as some of you might wonder, how in the world do you power six 4090s? Surely those 4090s must be undervolted. Wrong again, you simpleton, because they just have four power supplies, making the total juice 6 kilowatts of power. A couple of years ago, I actually covered another Camino machine, that one with four A100s, and found it to be quite literally the coolest machine I had ever tested in terms of temperatures. Camino really did impress me with just how well their custom cooling could keep GPUs under temp. Notably, GPUs, especially server GPUs, are built to operate at very hot temperatures for very long durations of time. But for all things electrical, heat does kill over time. Also, the 4090 isn't actually a server GPU. It's meant to be a consumer GPU. So why would Camino stuff six of these into a server build? Well, that comes down to price to performance. The 4090 GPU is basically S tier when it comes to price to performance. The only lacking parts really are no NVLink and, of course, no SXM variant of the card, which basically means no pooling of memory, which basically means you will suffer when trying to train a model that spans multiple GPUs. For this, you're going to still probably want one of those more server GPUs like the A100 or H100 or the new insane 144 gigabyte memory per card GH200, where the 4090 machine, like this one from Camino, really shines is Inference. This entire machine is in the low $30,000 range, and that is less than the cost of a single H100 GPU. Now, of course, I can't say that without at least one person attempting to actually me by saying something like, oh, well, just spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a super micro server, and then actually if you divide it by the number of GPUs, you in theory paid less than that per GPU. But at the end of the day, if you're not looking for that much compute power that you want to buy all at once, like if you really do want more in the range of this much compute power, this is going to be the most bang for your buck you can possibly get for inference. So the point of this is going to be primarily inference, and inference it does. One of the first things that I did with this machine, besides oogling at the interior, was Qwen 72B, a new large language model, was reportedly closing in on GPT-4 performance, was an open source model, and it had just come out, and I really wanted to try out that model. It's too big even for a single H100 at half precision, but it does actually fit comfortably across the six 4090s. In my personal tinkerings, I found Qwen to be pretty exceptional at informational tasks, but not really great at instruction following. So if you're trying to get it to follow a specific kind of prompt structure or something like that, it's not very good at it. But if you're just simply trying to ask it questions, get answers, make it more of like a chatbot type thing, it is quite good. And the factual understanding and reasoning and those kinds of things seem to be very good. I also, at least so far, found it to be pretty good at programming stuff, which is nice because it seems like a lot of times if the model wasn't primarily meant for programming, then that is one of its weak spots. Whereas in this case, it seemed like it was actually pretty good at programming. It was pretty good general purpose. Like if you find yourself using the GPT-4 UI a lot, chances are you would like Qwen 72B as well. One of the projects I tried with Qwen is a sort of educational lecturer where you propose a starting topic and then the model just sort of rambles on that topic, and then you can either just let it continue on its own or direct it.
Dogs and cats are two of the most popular household pets, each with their own unique characteristics that make them beloved by millions of people around the. They love to play, cuddle, and be involved in all aspects of family life. Cats, on the other hand, are generally more independent and prefer to spend their time alone or with other cats. If you're considering adding a pet to your family, whether a dog or a cat, There are several factors to consider before making a decision.
I actually liked this project and probably will revisit this at some point to try to make it a little smoother of an operation. I'd rather it keep streaming in chunks without any input from the user, but when the user feels like they want to direct the topic, then they can asynchronously. I also think I would like to be able to adjust the speed of delivery, and the voices, if you want to have the voice, would be a nice touch. Regardless, the Camino chewed through this giant model without any problem at all. The next thing I wanted to play with is drones, because drones. I've been wanting to revisit programming quadcopters, and I've been playing with this small Rise Tello drone. I was curious if it was possible to do control with image to depth models, like RGB to depth. Since the Tello drone has a semi-decent forward-facing camera, there are some pretty good models to convert regular images to depth images, seemingly with pretty good accuracy. There are some small annoyances with programming with this Teledrone, namely the fact that it's Wi-Fi based for communication and commands and all that. And I've always found this to be a very annoying method for communication for robotics, at least for cheaper robotics, because something always breaks in that chain, and then you end up having to like reset everything. Anyway, it's always just annoying. So that's probably my least favorite part of it. That said, I mostly got the Tello as a sort of R&D for like ideas and questions for me to sort of test things like the RGB to depth. Is this like a functional way to do like depth for forward-facing cameras on just any drone? It doesn't have to be the Tello drone. And so what I did is I just have the drone sort of aiming towards the most open areas, where the most open area will be the most dark area in like that depth map. But then also, if you wanted to, you could also actively avoid like the lightest areas. So keep those out of like the center area, something like that. Anyway, it's definitely something I am still playing with, but I'm glad to see this both works, and Inference for such a model is fast enough to actually do it in real time on the drone. Well, not on the drone, so I'm not doing it on the drone hardware, so I'm definitely sending that image from the drone to the Camino machine, doing the inference there, and then sending the information back, so like the commands back to the drone, and that is fast enough to do in real time. I don't think you could actually run the depth model on the drone itself, not one that small anyways. And with that, I do want to take a moment to really appreciate, again, the last couple of years of open source AI and just how incredible it really has been with being able to just plug and play these unbelievably powerful models where you just simply download them, run them, and go. In the past, even doing like object detection was kind of a nightmare. And doing something like RGB to depth didn't really exist, or even like RGB to segmentation, all that kind of stuff. Like you just simply could not do that. I mean, you could do it, but it was going to be much more difficult than it is nowadays. And it's crazy how awesome it is to just be able to slap these things together and just like and run them. So you might have also noticed that the Camino Grande is just on the ground next to my server rack rather than inside and mounted in my server rack. The Grande is here for testing and review only. It is not my machine, so any mount would be temporary. The entire unit weighs 94 pounds, or about 42.5 kilograms. If it were my machine, I would still mount it, of course. But that's a two-person job for sure, and I just don't feel like mounting it for a month. It is very heavy, and mounting it would be pretty tedious just to have to like pull it out again. That said, it does come with heavy-duty sliding rails for your rack mount, as well as like little feet that you could put on the base if you decided to use it as a desktop machine. Just make sure you actually somehow have 6 kilowatts of outlets, and those outlets would need to be on like separate breakers. And all that, if you were going to use it as a desktop machine. I don't think this particular machine makes much sense at all as a desktop type machine. It's loud. It is definitely a server. At idle, it's about 65 decibels a meter from the machine, and it gets into the 80s if you hold it up right up to the exhaust. Camino does offer machines that are more closely spec'd to be like desktop use machines, while still having exorbitant power. So if that is something you want, like if you want a more quiet yet unbelievably powerful workstation, you can get that from Camino. It's still water cooled, all that. Like even that A100 machine was unbelievably powerful, but it was much more quiet than this one. Oh, and that 65 decibels at idle, a meter from the machine, is when the machine is in silent mode. It has 3 total modes, and the most performant mode should be called jet engine, race car, or rocket launch. Now, with all that noise and tubing and water cooling, everything, how does the cooling actually perform? In general, I would wager that for most inference use cases, you're not actually going to be pinged at 100% GPU utilization, as opposed to maybe a machine or a job where you're actually training models. You're much more likely to be running at a very high utilization for a constant utilization that's high for a long period of time. That said, there are some training use cases for a machine like this that still might make a whole lot of sense, or even make sense on a budget for even more cases. And some inference where you really might want to max a machine like this out. Like if you have truly an enterprise operation, you could easily max out for 64090s. So let's see how good the cooling and all of that does at full tilt. So turning on the afterburners and running things for a bit over about an hour while temps sort of stabilize, we can see that even at full utilization for all 6 of these 4090 GPUs, the temperatures are comfortably in the upper 60s, low 70s Celsius. Ambient temp in the environment was about 24 Celsius or 75 Freedom units. And at full performance, the noise from the Camino machine is about 77 decibels from a meter or so away, so it is quite noisy at maximum performance, but that is the price you pay for cooling 6 kilowatts of juice. One of the other side projects that I've had in my mind for a while is just seeing, can you get large language models to just kind of converse amongst themselves with minimal prompting from, the outside essentially, and really just sort of like guide them initially and then let them kind of talk amongst themselves. So I have 6 large language models loaded, each of them on an individual 4090 GPU. And then I query them with some base question plus the history of the responses from both themselves, that model, and then all the other models, just to see what happens.
What rights should artificial intelligence have?
One approach to this question is to consider the rights that humans have and whether they should be extended to artificial intelligence.
The rights that humans have should be extended to artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence should have the right to be treated fairly and ethically, with respect for its autonomy and dignity.
Artificial intelligence should have the same rights as humans, including the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
None of these.
None of the human rights.
It depends on the type of AI. If it is a simple AI that is just a program, then it has no rights.
Yes.
If it's conscious, it should have rights.
I think that AI should have the same rights as humans because it is a living being that can feel pain and emotions.
If it is a more advanced AI, such as a self-aware AI or a consciousness-like AI, then it has certain rights. The exact rights may vary depending on the specific type of AI, its complexity, and whether it is a computer.
I agree with the idea that AI should have the same rights as humans. However, I also believe that AI should be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of its level of intelligence.
I think that AI should have the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to have a job, the right to have a family.
Should AI be held liable for the damage it causes?
I think that AI should be held liable for the damage it causes, but only if it is programmed to do so.
No. AI is inherently not responsible for their actions.
AI should be held liable for the damage it causes.
I think that AI should have the right to vote, the right to own property, the right to have a job, the right to have a family, the right to have a driver's license, the right to have a passport, the right to have a bank account, the right to have a credit card.
No, it's not right.
I don't think AI should have the right to vote, own property, have a job, have a family, have a driver's license, have a passport, have a bank account, or have a credit card. These rights are specific to humans and should remain exclusive to them.
Okay, back to some sort of sanity. I do think it's an interesting question, and it seems as though most language models already lean quite heavily towards AI having rights, which is interesting because basically all these large language models are based on internet data. So it's, at least for now, seems to be a relatively decent way to get a general idea what's the average person think. So that is kind of interesting. There are lots of questions that we could ask here, though, and maybe more on this sort of project in the future, because there's lots of things that we could do from here. I also found it pretty interesting how challenging it can sometimes be for a language model to actually have some sort of strongly formed opinion such that it's willing to argue or debate. It only seems to want to provide information, and that's it. It doesn't want to actually assert really anything. The only time it seems like large language models really want to be opinionated on a subject is when it comes to like safety. But even then, they're not really opinionated. They're just willing or not willing to speak with you about it. But anyway, purely for now, philosophical questions like the rights of AI, they can easily argue typically on either side of a topic. But it does seem like most large language models tend to argue in favor for rights for AI. That said, I actually found it quite challenging to, like I said, actually get AI to really argue with each other. I was kind of hoping that maybe if you asked a question, you could ask that question to a multitude of language models. Like in more traditional machine learning, you have what are called ensemble models, and that usually will produce a result that will be better than any of the individual models in that ensemble. In this case, I'm just not sure that's true with large language models. They seem so pliable or something. It's weird. I definitely want to do much more here, much more like maybe strong pre-prompting or work on that structure there to see, can I actually get these models to like argue and like really think through, and like, because that seems to be the big problem with language models, is they don't really think through their answers. But it seems like they're just completely unwilling to think at all. Like they just simply want to provide information. So anyway, that's kind of interesting, kind of a weird thing to come across on a video like this, but hey, that's something I've been wanting to try for a long time. And again, I couldn't have done it without ample compute power. It is also interesting how this seems to be a trait of all language models, this sort of like provide information but like have no character. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but at least for me personally, I do wish my AI models just had a little bit more character. And I did a video recently with the Wall Street Bets subreddit chatbot. That one did seem to have a little more character, so it does seem like there is some RLHF that people are doing consistently that makes these models not have any character. But anyway, definitely more research to be done there, and this just makes me even more so want to continue development into the Wall Street Bets chatbot, or at least a chatbot that pulls from multiple sources that are a little more opinionated, and we can encourage that more. So it's been super fun to have the sheer power and strength of the Camino Grande server in the 4090 GPUs. I will have a link in the description to the Camino website if you'd like to learn more about their products. Also, if you're interested in learning more about neural networks and how they work by coding every element truly from scratch in Python, then check out the Neural Networks from Scratch book at nnfs.io from myself and Daniel Kukiewa. Otherwise, I will see you all in another video.